Welcome to the debate. Today we're diving into Bill Vincent's really thought-provoking book, Prophetic Declarations. It explores the profound impact of, well, speaking God's word. And this isn't just some abstract theological exercise, right? It's about how people approach their faith practically, day to day. The core question for us today is, how exactly do these spiritual statements, these prophetic declarations, actually work? Are they like hitting a spiritual switch, directly activating specific supernatural outcomes through our words? Or are they perhaps more like a spiritual compass, guiding us into alignment and faith while God unfolds his plan in his own time? I'll be arguing that Vincent's book presents these declarations as a direct active mechanism for believers to trigger supernatural change and breakthrough.
And I'll be presenting the perspective that while declarations are profoundly vital, yes, their primary function is really more about fostering internal spiritual growth and alignment, building endurance, with the external manifestations ultimately unfolding according to God's sovereign timing and, importantly, process.
Okay, so to start, I really see Vincent's prophetic declarations as a clear articulation that these prophetic words are far from passive. They're meant to be active declarations of God's will, right? Designed to bring tangible encouragement, direction, and genuine transformation. The book strongly implies a direct spiritual mechanism. When we declare God's words and come into agreement with them, we're essentially releasing his power into our lives. It's about actively activating faith and inviting the supernatural into our present circumstances, whether that's, our finances, health, relationships, or future. This isn't just internal thinking. It highlights human participation as a direct catalyst for divine action. And we see this consistently throughout the book. For instance, Chapter 1, Your Season of Open Doors, talks about doors being unlocked by his divine power. And it encourages us to actively declare, Lord, I thank you for the doors you are opening in my life.
Right. Similarly, chapter 2, a wave of healing is being released, which is rooted in Jeremiah 30:17, isn't just about believing in healing. It encourages the declaration, Lord, I receive your healing in every area of my life. The book seems to promise specific, desirable outcomes that arise directly from this act of declaration, suggesting a sort of cause and effect relationship where our words initiate a divine response. Okay, I acknowledge the undeniable power of God's word and the importance of faith that Vincent's book emphasizes, absolutely. But I come at it from a slightly different angle, which is that the book's broader message, when you look at it holistically, suggests declarations primarily function to cultivate spiritual alignment, build endurance, and prepare the believer's heart. The actual manifestation of breakthrough in this view is a sovereign act of God, often unfolding through a process rather than an immediate direct activation just by our words alone. So while declarations are incredibly powerful for encouragement and aligning with God's purpose, they serve more as, let's say, a spiritual compass for the journey rather than a simple on-off switch for instant outcomes. The introduction itself frames prophecy as something meant to build up, stir faith, and draw us closer to him, to awaken spiritual hunger, bring confirmation, and break off doubt and fear. You notice the emphasis there is on internal spiritual states and growth.
Consider Chapter 3, God is making a way in the wilderness. It describes these wilderness seasons as feeling dry, lonely, and confusing, right? And it says God makes a way where there is no way through them, rather than instantly ending the wilderness season itself just because you declared it. This points to a journey of endurance and divine guidance through a season. Or think about Chapter 17, Your Pain is Producing Power, which says, every struggle is producing something powerful inside you. This sounds much more like internal transformation through suffering, not its immediate removal simply by declaration. So these examples, I think, suggest that declarations primarily provide strength to endure and align with God's broader, often unfolding plan, rather than acting as a direct human-initiated trigger for specific external events. I hear your emphasis on internal growth and process, and yes, those elements are certainly present in the book. But I would contend that the mechanism of activation and release of power, as explicitly described, points to something, more direct than just spiritual alignment. Vincent uses remarkably strong, active language in the introduction when he says, "When we come into agreement with God's prophetic words, we release His power into our lives. And when we declare His truth over our finances, health, relationships, and future, we activate faith and invite the supernatural into our situations." Now, this doesn't sound like merely preparing for what God might do later. It feels like a clear call to proactive engagement. Our declaration, our spoken word, is presented as a conduit for divine intervention, actively transforming present reality. The book even reinforces this by instructing us to speak them out loud, meditate on them, and trust that God is moving on your behalf. It seems to imply a direct operational trigger, where our active participation with these words literally releases God's power. It's not just about receiving, but actively speaking to engage the divine.
Okay, I hear your emphasis on those active verbs, release, activate, and they're certainly prominent. No question. But I find myself asking, does release or activate automatically mean direct, immediate human control over an outcome? I'm just not convinced that's the primary interpretation Vincent intends when we look at the whole picture. While yes, our words have power is affirmed, interpreting release His power or activate faith as a human-initiated control mechanism for supernatural outcomes, well, that requires careful discernment, I think. The book itself offers a more nuanced view in places. In chapter 3, for example, it describes God making a way for you. Even when I don't see it, I know you are working on my behalf. Now that implies God's hidden, ongoing work, which can operate independently of our immediate declaration or what we might perceive as direct activation. And what about chapter 10? God is positioning you for a suddenly.
Right.
It highlights God's sovereign timing and initiative in bringing about rapid change. It's God who is doing the positioning, it says, not necessarily our declaration directly commanding the suddenly. So perhaps the activation is more about activating the believer's own faith and receptivity to God's preordained timing, rather than us directly commanding God's power as if our words are the absolute switch. It's more about readiness for God's move, perhaps, not initiating the move itself.
I see why you emphasize that aspect of divine timing. But let me offer a different perspective on the very nature of breakthrough and supernatural change, as presented in the book. Vincent doesn't shy away from promising direct, tangible breakthroughs through these prophetic words. I mean, think about chapter 1. Your season of open doors, which states, what was once locked is now being unlocked by His divine power. This isn't framed as enduring a season of closed doors until God eventually opens one. It reads like the doors are being opened by this divine power released through declaration. Or take chapter 2, a wave of healing is being released. It speaks of physical, emotional, or spiritual healing, declaring definitively, sickness and affliction have no place in me. These are quite direct, confrontational declarations against undesirable outcomes. Chapter 21, Divine Recompense is Coming, promises double for your trouble and the restoration of your joy, your peace, your time. These feel like specific, concrete outcomes, presented as direct results of engaging with and declaring these prophetic words, and implies a direct and often immediate impact on external circumstances, not merely a gradual internal strengthening or preparation for some future distant breakthrough.
That's a compelling argument for immediate, direct manifestation, and the book certainly has passages that speak powerfully to that. But have you considered how many sections within the material itself seem to highlight processes of endurance and internal transformation that precede or at least accompany external changes? While God undeniably brings breakthrough, the book doesn't exclusively present an instant direct manifestation model, does it? For instance, chapter 3 notes, wilderness seasons can feel dry, lonely, and confusing, and clarifies, the enemy wants you to believe that the wilderness is your final destination, but it's only a passage to your promise. This suggests that God makes a way through difficult periods, acknowledging their reality and duration, not necessarily bypassing them entirely with a single declaration. It feels like a journey.
A passage to the promise, though, not the promise itself.
Right, but a passage nonetheless, implying time and process. Similarly, chapter 17, Your Pain is Producing Power, asserts that suffering isn't wasted, but is producing something powerful inside you.
This emphasizes internal spiritual growth and character development as a key outcome, not just the instant removal of pain. Even chapter 18, No More Wasted Seasons, speaks of God restoring years. Now, restoring undeniably implies a timeline and a process of recovery and divine intervention over time, not merely an immediate reversal of past losses through declaration alone. It seems to be about working through circumstances with faith, not just making them vanish instantly.
Okay. But I'm not convinced that the emphasis on process negates the direct operational power of declarations. To me, the book strongly emphasizes human participation and obedience as crucial to unlocking these promises, which suggests a more active and perhaps immediate role in determining the timing and nature of outcomes. It explicitly states in the introduction, prophetic words are not passive. They require our participation. When we hear a word from God, we must declare it, stand on it, and move forward in faith. I mean, that sounds like active human agency at its core, doesn't it? It suggests a direct link. Furthermore, chapter 24, The Key to Your Next Level is Obedience, explicitly links blessings and elevation to human obedience, stating elevation in the kingdom isn't about striving, it's about obedience. This whole framework suggests that desired outcomes are contingent upon the believer's active response and declarations, thereby placing a significant emphasis on human agency in the manifestation of divine will, rather than it being solely about God's sovereign predetermined timing. Our actions, our declarations, seem presented as vital components for the actualization of divine will, almost like conditions, maybe, for God to move in certain ways.
I understand why you highlight that aspect of human participation and obedience, and it's certainly an important theme within the book, no doubt. However, my perspective is that this is balanced with an equally strong, perhaps even stronger, emphasis on divine sovereignty and orchestration throughout the material. Take chapter 5, Your Name is Being Mentioned in the Rig. It describes God working behind the scenes, aligning you with the right people, the right doors, and the right opportunities. And crucially, it reassures the reader, you don't have to manipulate or strive. Trust that God is working on your behalf. Now, that profoundly suggests that God's sovereign hand is the primary mover, orchestrating events in his timing, often independent of our direct human efforts to activate or release those specific outcomes. It implies a deeper, often unseen divine initiative.
Trusting while still declaring, perhaps?
Perhaps, but the emphasis is on trusting God's work. Similarly, returning to God is positioning you for a suddenly in chapter 10, it again highlights divine initiative in preparing and timing breakthroughs, rather than implying that human declaration is the ultimate determinant. The material also notes, as we mentioned, that prophetic words are declarations of God's will in the introduction. To me, this implies an alignment with an already established divine plan, rather than us dictating that plan through our words. Our participation, then, is about aligning with what God is already doing or intends to do, rather than directly causing it to happen now on our command.
Okay. Well, our discussion today has really explored the intricate relationship between prophetic declarations, human faith, and divine action as presented in Bill Vincent's prophetic declarations. I've certainly made a case for the direct, active power of believers' declarations to manifest specific supernatural outcomes, drawing on the book's consistent emphasis on actively releasing and activating God's power through spoken words. The material for my reading consistently provides a framework where proactive declaration serves as a direct catalyst for divine intervention, influencing present realities and unlocking specific promises.
Then, while affirming the profound importance and power of prophetic words, I've illuminated the perspective that their primary role may be more centered on cultivating spiritual alignment, building endurance through trials, and preparing the heart for God's sovereign and, yes, often process-oriented work. My argument, also deeply rooted in the text, suggests that declarations primarily empower the believer to walk faithfully through God's timing and plan, acting more like that spiritual compass for the journey rather than immediate triggers for external events.
Right. Both viewpoints clearly draw deeply from the material, which showcases the richness and, frankly, the potential for diverse interpretation within spiritual texts concerning faith and action. We've certainly seen how the book contains elements that support both direct immediate manifestations through declaration.
And also those that underscore patience, divine timing, and internal transformation.
Absolutely. The dialogue today really highlights that understanding prophetic declarations invites a nuanced consideration of human responsibility and divine sovereignty. It's a complex interplay, and there is clearly much more to explore in this material regarding how our words and God's work intersect. It's not straightforward.